Listen, becoming a fantasy reader might well change your life. You don't want to be taking advice from just anybody, least of all me. But don't worry, because I didn't come up with this list, science did. That's right, I trawled through YouTube, scoured the shelves, and reviewed the Reddits, tallying up the amount of times each one was mentioned, and came up with the top 10 novels you can read to start enjoying fantasy. So grab your bookmarks and get ready to start the journey. The first thing that most people think of when you mention fantasy is wizened old wizards, elves dancing around campfires, epic battles for good and evil, dragons, orcs, and everything in between. Maybe you fancy something that's got all of that, but Lord of the Rings feels a little intimidating. Well, I've got good news for you, because Ryan Cahill's Bound and the Broken series has all of the above and more. You'll get lost in the world of Etheria, a land divided by war, mistrust, and about as much tension as a group chat where someone mentioned politics. Where a magic system known as the Spark allows users to tap into natural forces like air, earth, fire, water, and spirit and manipulate them in epic battles. Cahill has grabbed the epicness of Lord of the Rings, the sheer scope of Wheel of Time, sprinkled in a few Dragon Riders, and somehow made it even cooler. Like upgrading your old clunker to a sports car with flame decals. You'll start your journey with young Caelan Breyer, a seemingly ordinary villager who's about to face his coming-of-age trial, The Proving. But when fate throws him into a 1,000-year war, he finds himself on a ride wilder than a Black Friday sale in a tech store. Except instead of flying elbows and questionable decisions over discount air fryers, you get magic, prophecies, and battle. The best bit is, if you're not ready to commit to his first 500-page epic, then you can dip your toe into the world by picking up his 70-page novella The Fall, and you can do so for absolutely free by signing up to his mailing list. If you'd rather start with something that has been a gateway for many people since 1996, then the next one will do just that. By now, we all know the story behind what could have been the best TV show ever made, but failed to stick the landing. It's hard to believe there was such a time when Game of Thrones was watched by all. The anticipated discussions of who will make it to the end and who might claim the Iron Throne kept us pumped for almost a decade. But then, on that fateful day back in May 2019, that one character made that one decision which didn't just burn down King's Landing, it blitzed the entire franchise too. Ever since, any mention of Lannisters, White Walkers, or very uncomfortable thrones has left a bitter taste in the population's mouth. But that's no reason to compare it to the books, which are actually a very different story in their own right. Yes, there might only be 5 of them, and no, they might never be finished, but evidence suggests whatever sits between those pages is in and of itself a fantastic experience, and one that would be a great start to your new life as a fantasy fanatic. Try saying that when you're drunk. That being said, if the length of this one puts you off, then the next one might be up your alley. This one is another that has hit the big time, and it doesn't just have a TV series, it also has a set of video games too. But I've learned myself that to enjoy this series, you need to go in knowing all of the facts. If you haven't already guessed, I'm talking about the Witcher franchise. Now, I have only just finished reading this series, and what I can say is what makes this series stand out as a place to begin for me is the fact that it opens up with 2 books that are basically a collection of short stories, which, surplus to what the Western release will have you believe, you need to read first. What's great about this is that you can dip into the start of the book, and there are some really easy stepping off points if you find that it's not for you, making this one of the least time-consuming places to get started. By now, you're probably wondering what these books are actually about, and if you're anything like me, you already have some preconceived ideas, so I'm going to give you the same advice that was given to me when I started out the journey. It isn't what you're expecting. Playing the games or watching the show might have you believe that you'll be following a Witcher called Geralt of Riviera. And while this is sort of true to some extent, when you get to the main story, you realise that the scope of the series is much bigger. There are times when Geralt doesn't even appear for 100 pages. There's themes of destiny, monsters, and war, and that's just scratching the surface. All I'm gonna say is expect the unexpected. Oh, and the video games are actually a sequel to the books, so maybe it's best you left them till last. But if stepping into a vast fantasy world isn't what you're after, then the next one might be the best place to start. It's set on the streets of Chicago and follows Harry Dresden, the city's only wizard for hire. The Dresden Files are an urban fantasy that feel more like a crime thriller than your typical quest-based romp. In fact, if you've just come in having read some of Lee Child's Jack Reacher or any of the James Patterson books, then this is a series that could get you started. It's full of supernatural thrills and gripping mysteries that keep you reading right until the last page. But the great thing about this franchise comes from within the depth of its characters. From the snarky wizard Dresden to the ruthless vampire queen Lara Wraith, the Dresden Files delivers a cast of characters that redefine what it means to live in a world full of magic and mayhem. Jim Butcher's writing style is so fast-paced he'll have you turning those pages in no time. That being said, if you're partial to a bit of purple prose, then this next entry might get you excited. Imagine you're at a pub and the bartender starts telling you his life story. Except he's not just any bartender. He's basically a mix of Ed Sheeran, MacGyver, and that one friend who always insists.
Seriously, dude? I could have gone pro.
That's the Kingkiller Chronicles in a nutshell. Kvarth, our hero, is a once legendary badass turned innkeeper who's decided to spill the tea on his wild past. It's got everything from a tragic childhood to a magical university that's more dangerous than trying to heat fish in the office microwave. Then of course there's his mysterious love life, which is somehow both infuriating and more complicated than trying to figure out how to split the bill with friends after dinner. But it's not just Kvarth's crazy adventures, it's also how the story plays with truth. Is Kvarth a misunderstood genius, or is he just a guy who always talks himself into trouble? Who knows, but lots of people have said that the series is gripping, beautifully written, and occasionally as slow as waiting for customer service to pick up. But if flowery prose isn't your thing, and you just want some good old-fashioned fantasy, then the next one might be your pick. Imagine waking up one day with glowing skin, fabulous hair, and godlike magic. But then the glow-up dies. The city turns to a rotting dump, your glow-up turns to ash, and your hair falls out faster than a cheap wig in a hurricane. Elantris drops you into this mess following 3 characters. Raoden, a crown prince who wakes up cursed and gets thrown into the city. Serene, his political bride turned widow before they even met. And Harathan, a fire and brimstone priest on a mission to convert the masses. Or else. If you're into political intrigue, epic mysteries, or sarcastic brides owning everyone, then Elantris will be your perfect entry point. Not ready to sink 600 plus pages yet? I've got some good news. The next entry is set in the same world, but is a heck of a lot smaller and will take less time to read. I'm talking about The Emperor's Soul. This pint-sized masterpiece packs more punch than a double shot of espresso. The main character is called Shai. She's basically a magical hacker with a love of arts and crafts. She's given one job: rewrite the soul of the Emperor using magical stamps. It's like Photoshop for reality, except instead of fixing Red Eye, she's fixing a guy's entire personality. No pressure, right? At under 180 pages, this isn't a book, it's a fantasy snack. And unlike some of the other chunky tomes in the genre, you won't need a gym membership to carry it around. You could read it in an afternoon and still have time to argue about it on Reddit. But if you haven't heard of the next entry, I'm wondering what rock you've been living under. It's actually the series that got me started reading at the age of 7. The first time I dropped the picture books and taken to a book with over 200 pages and the smallest writing I'd seen until then. I'm talking about the Harry Potter franchise, which continues to sell out to this day. If you don't already know, it is the story of a young boy who survives the killing curse of an evil Dark Lord. We follow his adventures as he goes to wizarding school to hone his abilities, while said Dark Lord tries to return. You don't have to do that, you just... Seriously, you can stop now. I think that's enough said, but you'll never guess what hit second place. This one is a tad older than Harry Potter, and possibly one of the biggest influences on what we know as fantasy today. It's where it all started for Tolkien, in a cozy hobbit hole, where the bumbling Bilbo Baggins is happily living out his very quiet and comfortable life until a wizard called Gandalf turns up with a merry band of dwarves, and suddenly he finds himself on a quest to steal gold from a dragon. It was a toss-up between this one and Lord of the Rings, but not only is this one a lot smaller, it's also much more accessible for your first read. I actually read this one accompanied by an audiobook put together for free by a YouTube channel called Marcel van den Bard. It's a great piece of work, and best consumed while curled up with a hot cuppa on a wet and windy day. The last one on the list was mentioned by every single person that I checked in with. It's what I would call a blockbuster of a book, in the fact that it's super epic and very accessible. I can just hear the fantasy fans saying,
It's Mistborn, isn't it?
yes, it's Mistborn. If you, like me, were brought up on a healthy dose of Harry Potter and wondered what might happen if the Dark Lord won, then this is the book for you. On top of that, if you enjoyed the film Ocean's 11, then you are going to have a blast reading this one. And if that's not enough to convince you to pick up the book and start reading, then you might want to consider the 7 signs that you're ready to start reading Mistborn, which I lay out for you in this video right here.